The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Planted with Sara. I'm Sara Pyan, your host, and today we have Director of Specialty Banking at Hanover Bank, Peter Sue, on the show. Peter, I'm so excited to talk to you today. I know, like, sometimes people are think banking. What's up with that? But it's a very exciting and maybe like it's also in some ways problematic in the cannabis industry. So
why do you say that?
Well, I know, right? So I'm looking forward to talking to you as my designated banking demystifier.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, totally. And I'm excited about our conversation and to educate our listeners a little bit more about it so that they understand the landscape, because it is a weird thing, especially because just about everything you can buy with a credit card these days. But before we get into that, what was your first cannabis experience?
Okay, so I know that for your demographic, for your audience, this is making me sound a little uncool, but I did not grow up smoking or consuming cannabis in any way. So it was my 21st birthday, and I was in a fraternity, and everybody smoked, right? So I used to hang out, and they would pass to me, and I would pass on. And you know how it is. People are cool about it. There was no pressure. And then one day I again, my birthday, I smoked. And it was a couple of rounds before somebody realized it, and I hear them whispering, like, "Oh, is Pete smoking? Is Pete smoking?" So that was my first experience. I was 21.
They must have been secretly delighted. They're like, "Oh my God, he actually did it." Because I know, like, for when I had friends that like abstain, and of course there's never any pressure.
Yeah.
But the first time that they'd ever try, everybody would be like, kind of sitting back and being like, "Oh, what's gonna happen now?"
Can't wait to see what's going to happen next. But yes, I would say this about smokers, about cannabis folks. Zero peer pressure. No one ever, you know how it is. People would pass me the joint. I would pass it on. Nobody would say anything. That was just accepted. I was cool. Like, it's no problem. Conversely, in alcohol, right, you do get people are like, "Oh, you're not drinking? What are you doing? What's going on? What's wrong? Is everything okay?"
Yeah, isn't that funny? I know, like, it's not to say that I don't enjoy like a glass of wine or a little bourbon here and there, but I'm not much of a drinker. So when I go out with people, I usually ask for a ginger beer on the rocks with a squeeze of lime, and I walk around and everyone thinks I have an alcoholic beverage, and then I leave and go to the curb and smoke a joint.
I mean, look, if you've been in a bar, you absolutely feel social pressure to have something in your hand. So you have to pretend, to your point, right? Like, even if you just go get a Coke, because if you're the only person standing there with nothing in your hands, like, there are times when I actually feel funny. I don't know what to do with my hands.
I know. Well, and then I also feel funny, like, especially as somebody, who's worked in entertainment, and I was a bartender once, although it is the only job that I've ever been fired from because I couldn't deal with the nonsense. But, I always feel bad if I'm in a bar and I don't have something in my hand because I feel like I haven't paid my ticket to get in.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. I hope I'm not taking your conversation out of sequence here, but I do want to tell you I recently had a bad experience with cannabis.
Oh, let's talk about it.
I went to an event during BizCon. Someone handed me 100 milligram THC drink. And I, the idiot that I am, thought, yeah, okay.
Oh, boy.
Now, I'm not that much of an idiot, so it's not like I drank the whole thing. I figured I drank less than a quarter. So let's just say I had 25 milligrams of THC in one, over a few hours. I had a complete meltdown. I did not. It was way too much. Thankfully I realized it. So it's Vegas, it's MJ BizCon. Everybody there knew what was going on. They were like, "Dude, you're okay, relax." But I sensed it coming on, luckily, right? So I said, I screwed up. I gotta go. Yeah. So I went, jumped in the cab. I went back. I started having a panic attack in the cab. Oh. I went into my room and I had a full meltdown. Like a full meltdown.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about, like, with beverages, and the nanoemulsions, which creates a
Yeah.
greater bioavailability. So that 25 milligrams in a drink is very different than 25 milligrams in a lot of edibles.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this, and I talked to some of my, normie friends about it. So, people love saying like, no one has ever died from consuming cannabis. And mind you, I didn't die from consuming cannabis. But I think there is a point to be made here, which is like if you're smoking, right? And look, let's be honest, now cannabis is much more potent today than it has ever been, right? But if you're smoking, sure, it's very easy to say, okay, I've had enough.
Yeah.
But if you're consuming, let's say, a drink, in my case, by the time it hits you, right, it's too late. You can't do anything about it. And if you've overconsumed, you're kind of stuck with it. Like there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, I mean, you can, for some people, if they tolerate CBD, they can have a little bit of that to offset the effects. But
Oh, is that right? Okay.
yeah, you can,
Okay.
it does work in a way. It's like it doesn't make you necessarily less high,
Yeah.
but it will get rid of some of the anxiety and panic. But I totally get that. I actually had a bunch of THCA
Okay.
um, that had converted
That's a
to.
whole nother topic.
Oh, well, and this was before we were talking about like hemp derived, products and this is THCA flower, which I'm like, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
you know, but I'd had this THCA tincture and I was coming
Okay.
down with the flu. And one of the things that I used to do when I would feel like I was coming down with the flu is I would take copious amounts of THCA and I would find that sometimes the symptoms would actually go away or
Oh,
I'd
okay.
bounce back faster. So I
Yeah.
was I was at work and it was one of those years where it would have been my second time going through the flu. And I
Okay.
went into the back room and I was like, do we have, and this was, and everyone listening, this is not during legalization time. This was back in medicinal 215 days. I was like, do we have any samples of that THCA tincture? And my colleague hands it to me, but it was an alcohol based one, which is kind of like, and it hadn't been kept, like, it'd just been kept on a shelf. There was no, I chugged the whole bottle. It had converted to THC.
Uh,
I
okay.
tripped.
Okay.
And the thing that I learned from that was that I always tell people in my classes, if you're using edibles or something that, you're consuming other than inhaling, there may come a time where you miss the mark and you take way more than you need to. It can happen.
Yeah.
And the first thing I was like, it's uncomfortable. It's it's a learning experience. But first,
Yeah.
get somewhere comfortable, drink a lot of water, take some CBD if you can,
Yeah.
and first and foremost, well, maybe not first and foremost, but overarching, forgive yourself because it's a humbling experience.
It is. Yeah.
How did you feel the next day?
Well, there is something to be said for that. I felt okay. Like
Yeah.
I felt exhausted because my heart was like going crazy,
Oh, I'm
right?
sure.
So by the time I recovered, I guess you could say, I just felt like drained, like I got beaten up or something like that. But still, honestly, better than alcohol. Like
Yeah.
I didn't throw up. I didn't wake up with like, oh my God, what happened last night? I just woke up like a little shaky, like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that to myself. You know? And by the way, I'm owning it. I'm not blaming the drink. I'm not blaming anybody.
No.
That was my mistake. But yeah, like I thought I was going to die. And when I say I thought I was going to die, I don't mean like I felt sick. I
Yeah.
mean like I genuinely had that thought, like psychosis, right? I had this thought, like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to die.
I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's real because you've got all these. I mean, people forget that it's, people are like, oh, cannabis, it's, it'll get you high, it'll relax you, this and that. But
Oh
it
no.
does, I mean, it changes your state of mind. And if
Yeah,
you have enough, especially like not necessarily smoking it, but if you
yeah,
eat it, you can trip balls.
yeah. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. No, I had when it's I was we used to have these tiny little brownies that were like, they look kind of like if you go to like Costco or Sam's Club and they have those brownie bites that you can get, they look like that. And they were like 125 milligrams of THC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they were like these caramel pecans. They just sounded wonderful. And this woman came in and she was like, I want that. And I was like, do you know how many milligrams you normally take? Well, I've never tried it before, but that looks really good. And that's what I want. And I was like, if you don't know how many milligrams you take, that is too much for you, even if you break it up into tiny bits. Yeah. And she's like, oh, I want it. I want it. I want it. So finally, I just put my hands on the bar and I was like, listen, I'm going to be straight with you. If you buy this brownie and you eat it, even if you don't believe in him, Jesus is going to show up and tell you how dumb you are. And she was like, point well taken. I was like, you'll be holding on to the toilet, talking to Jesus, whether you believe in him or not, and he will be mocking you. Yeah. And she was like, okay. Because it's like, and I think that's one of the things like, the first time that I had Michael Steele on the podcast, we talked about a little bit about the Tylenol moment, although there were deaths with the Tylenol incident, but, that controversial moment that people are like, oh my God, the sky is falling. Something bad just happened. And it's like, we have to avoid having that happen in cannabis by having these conversations about what happens if you have too much. Putting the onus on the user, but also, if you're experimenting, or in your case, you're trying to be careful, but the way your body works, it kind of you kind of jump the shark on it. But, taking the shame away from like having a bad experience, because you will be safe and it is okay. And for people who can't use cannabis, even though we create our own endogenous cannabinoids, they don't work well with phytocannabinoids, saying, it's not for everybody. And that's all right too. Like just making sure that people understand. And I think one of the things that we're really missing in our industry is, back in the medicinal days, we had more conversations about education and dosage. And then as we started getting into the larger MSOs and everything, they went back to the old trope. Weed sells itself. We don't need education. All we need are celebrities coming and pushing their brands and it'll be all cool. And it's like, well, if you want to reach a larger audience and, it's like people are like, oh, we aren't making money. We aren't selling enough. I thought it sold itself. They're missing this large market of people who would embrace using it for wellness, but we're not having the conversations that draw them in, and we're not creating that safe container for experimentation that creates the healthy outcomes that make people think, maybe I could incorporate this. And even if it's not THC, maybe I like CBG or, something like that.
It's a very fair point, from a business perspective, right? Like if, like say I was an experimenting consumer, right? Like it's my first time or whatever the case may be. And now I've had a bad, terrible experience, right? Or God forbid the night had gone in a very different way, right? Like literally reefer madness, right? Like running down the strip, like, oh my God, I'm dying, right? Like imagine me having laugh. A complete...
Sorry, Peter.
But imagine me having a full freak out, right? Like a freak out moment in public. Like I understood enough to say, oh, I better get out of here. I better get myself somewhere safe and have my freak out there. But if I didn't, and and frankly, it started to happen because I was having a meltdown in the cab. so that could have been, right? Like that could have. Now listen, the cab driver in Vegas, that was probably the mildest thing he saw that night.
Oh, that cab driver's seen some shit. He has.
But, that's the sort of story that really damages things, right? Like imagine, and imagine someone like me with a little bit of profile saying like, oh yeah, no, don't do this. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad product. Yeah, that's damaging for the industry. So yeah. Whether it's education, whether it's not having the product available, right? Like, again, I don't want to blame it, but it's true. Right. That's a very strong product.
Yeah. Well, and it's, for somebody who's dealing with a great deal of pain or may need a larger amount of cannabinoids for, some sort of benefit, it's nice to have those available, but for the general public who's using it, and I'll say adult use, because I'm one of those people that I'm like, even if you're saying you're using it recreationally, it's changing your mindset. It's
Yeah.
helping, kind of
Yeah.
create homeostasis, because I think, happiness is homeostasis.
Yeah.
But it's, I think the more mindful conversations about dosage is huge, because I can't tell you how many times I have conversations with people and they're like, I'm dealing with this, or I want to feel this way, or blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, do you know where you're at as far as THC dosage? How many milligrams is a comfortable dose for you? And
Right.
9 times out of 10, I mean, not in our industry, because, everybody knows what they can take pretty much. But, people that are, that are not in cannabis, they'll be like, I don't know.
Not a clue. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Or even like people who are curious, and like during the pandemic, we would have people over hanging out in the garden outside, and I would have cannabis drinks. And there were friends who hadn't touched cannabis in years, but with the pandemic, everybody was like, I'm in, let's do it.
Why not?
It's like, I was like, drink all the
No
wine, eat the
cars on the
dessert.
road.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're like, oh, I don't know. And it's like, well, it's, it'd be like the canned beverages, which are really light. They're like 2.5 milligrams. And
Yeah.
they'd be like, can I do that? Like,
Yeah.
what's this going to be like? I had a bad experience on acid once. I'm like, no, it's not going to be like that. Let's talk about
Right.
like, milligram amounts and how that works for somebody. But, your mileage may vary, because we're all crazy walking chemistry experiments. And, what works
Yeah.
well for me may not be what works well for you. I know, like, I tend to have, like, I'll give a guest a 2.5 milligram drink, and then they're like, you're drinking 20 milligrams? I'm like, yeah, and I'm going to go right after this, but my body works very differently.
Oh yeah, when I was telling my friends about it the next day, sort of shamefully, right? Like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened to me yesterday.
Oh,
A few of them said like, oh yeah, I have a few of those 100 milligram drinks at night, and I'm like, a few of those? Like, I almost died on one.
yeah, see, I'm with you. If I'd had a few of those on a night, I'd be doing what that lady that wanted to buy the brownie, what I was telling her would happen. I'd be very sick.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's all so different, and it's, and then there's also, and this isn't me wanting to like monitor like, oh, people shouldn't have as much as they do, but there is something to be said for keeping your tolerance at a certain level, because when you oversaturate, your endocannabinoid system, it's like, yeah, it's like, I remember when I worked in the dispensary, I had this guy who came in, and he had a syringe of oil, put it down in front of me, looked me in the eyes, and he was a towering man. And he was like, I was using cannabis to get off of hard drugs, and this isn't doing anything for me anymore.
Oh boy.
I looked at him and I was like, well, cannabis isn't going to fill the hole that you're looking to work with. Like,
Oh damn. You were keeping it real.
yeah, I was like, I can't help you with it. It's just a tool amongst many that you need to help create that balance for yourself.
Yeah.
And I was like, because I think there are, even though it's not physically addicting, we can have bad relationships, and having those conversations, I think, is so incredibly important for us, so that we keep people safe. We also don't create a lot of drama around cannabis and cannabis use, because I think there's a certain responsibility that we take as actors in the industry to, say, hey, this is, everybody's different, but if you're noticing this and this and this, you might not have a good relationship with cannabis. Or, and there's no shame around that. It's about helping people create the balance for themselves. I mean, you can have a bad relationship with anything, like chocolate is mine. And as you can see from my large cup of coffee here, I'm a coffee achiever.
Well, I do worry. I do think that, like, at times people in the industry can be defensive,
Yeah.
So this is probably true in society in general, right? Like
Oh,
we don't have
totally.
enough debate, discourse about topics. So recently on LinkedIn, I put a post where there was a study done by some medical school or whatever, right? They came to the conclusion, the psychiatrist, right, said that approximately 1 in 10 people that use cannabis will be addicted. Now, setting aside the question of, okay, let's challenge the veracity of those claims, the study, the scientific method, sure. But if you looked at the comments in my comment section, it was a lot of like, what a hack, stuff like that. And I'm like, but wait, let's talk. But you should addicting, right? So you can't reject this notion that
Mm-mm.
10% of people could possibly be addicted. 10% is not even that high. Like I'm sure chocolate is more, coffee is more addicting than that, right? So are you just rejecting the conversation outright? Or are you saying, like, if you want to debate the study, sure. But no, these are people just rejecting the comments, rejecting the findings sort of ad hoc, right? Like just at
Right.
face value. And I disagree with that. I think it's okay. You should welcome the conversation.
I think in order to create, a healthy landscape for cannabis, we need to welcome those conversations.
Yeah,
I understand that with all the stigma that we've been up against for years and
sure.
years, people get defensive. But it's
Yeah,
even like when we talk about things like, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and people are like, it's not true, it's a lie. And when people come
yeah,
out with their issues with it, getting harassed. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's not how you create a healthy environment. We have
right.
to talk about it. I've had many times where I've been at different gatherings and people are like, "This is Sarah. She cured her cancer with cannabis." And I'm like,
Wow.
"No, I didn't. My mother's a clinical researcher and did the clinical trials on Full Fox 5 that I took and almost killed me twice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but that therapy and a colon resectioning is why I'm alive today. Now, did
Oh,
cannabis
wow.
help me? Absolutely.
Yeah,
I used it for symptom management. Have I met people who have used, cannabinoid therapies and it has helped them as a therapy, not a cure with their cannabis? I mean, with their cannabis, with their cancer?
yeah,
Absolutely. But when we start having these things where we're saying it cures this or it cures COVID or
oh, yeah,
it's great for everything. It's like, it's like the joke that we used to have before with CBD and likening it to my big fat Greek wedding when the dad like sprays Windex
with
on
the
everything.
window.
Yeah. And it's like there's much more to it's much more nuanced than that. Let's let's talk about the possibilities. Let's talk about, the
Yeah,
successful outcomes, but let's not overshoot it because that's
yeah,
not that's setting ourselves up for failure. And if we can't have good discourse on these issues, how can we expect to represent ourselves to create better policy?
yeah, yeah. I remember somebody made this meme, Frank's Red Hot, the sauce. We put that shit in everything. Remember
Yeah,
that?
I love that.
And somebody made that with the CBD because that back then. Do you remember the CBD pillowcases?
Yes.
The CBD pillows. Like, where were you going with that?
They had CBD clothes. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's still stuff floating out there somewhere that's like that. It's like,
Yeah.
that and Cannabumps were like the ones that I was just like,
Oh, yeah, the bumps. I forgot about that.
highly
Well,
suspect.
I find it sort of fascinating. Somebody said they compared it to like there's certain things that everybody knows, right? Like you can't just put you can't just put anything in food
Right.
and start selling it, right? Everybody knows this, right? But what happens in cannabis? Oh, we put CBD in everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the thing that it's really interesting because CBD in some ways is a really excellent entry point for people,
Yeah,
especially if they're afraid of euphoria. But as far as like a financial, like creating generational wealth and, creating a business, it kind of went the way in many ways of like MLMs. Like I
yeah,
taught a class once on the non-euphorics and there was this whole family of people who shoveled in at the last minute and they're in the back of the room. And normally when I see that, it's because a family member's sick and they all come.
Yeah.
And at the end, they came up to me and they were like, so explain to me, is CBD the plant or the seed? And I was like, it's not. It's a cannabinoid.
Right.
It's a molecule that's part of the entire, there are lots of other things that are coming into play, but it's a cannabinoid. These are the things that, it creates and blah, blah, blah. They were starting their own CBD company. And that was, for me, that was when I realized that it had like gotten way out of control because people were not looking at what it did, but they were looking at the opportunities, which you can't fault somebody for that.
Of course. Yeah.
But, it's a dangerous situation when it's like, you can get your CBD at a gas station or a check cashing place. And, where are the COAs? Like, cannabis, hemp, whatever you want to call it, is a bioaccumulator. And are we talking about the interactions of, people taking pharmaceuticals that have cytochrome P450 interactions? They're the same ones where it says do not take with grapefruit juice. The reason that you don't take it with grapefruit juice is because it changes the way you metabolize it, because there's this enzyme called cytochrome P450 that's in our liver. So this isn't about inhaling cannabis, but it's about ingesting it. So ingesting CBD, and if you have those very same drugs that you're using, it will change the way you metabolize your pharmaceutical. And it's not to say that you can't use it, but you should talk to your doctor and let them know that it has a cytochrome P450 interaction, and they'll understand that. They may not understand CBD, but they'll understand that interaction. Or the fact that there are people who are actually very sensitive to CBD. We thought it was a lot less than it was before, but as more and more people are using cannabis, and this is a fascinating thing, it's like we're understanding more and more about the anomalies of people's reactions. Like, some people get a general malaise and they get really depressed using CBD. Some people, instead of it helping their anxiety, it actually ratchets it up. And it's a very small portion of the public, but it's larger than we thought. And when we were able to like gather more information, and we're not, just dealing with small pools of people, and we're like, this is how people react to it, so therefore this is how everybody is. When we open up that conversation to greater possibilities, and not in these bad things happen so no one should use it, but this is what you should be mindful for and use critical thought, we create a much friendlier, more nuanced conversation.
Right. Yeah. But again, just welcoming the discourse, right? Like if somebody's saying, 10%, 1 out of 10 people, and you disagree, that's okay.
Totally.
But you shouldn't reject that conversation outright.
No, and I feel like I don't know if it's maybe it's a combination of all of it. It's like the war on drugs, the hard time in our industry, people coming from the Wild West out into the open. But there's a lot of people who get really defensive when you start how do you know something's true until you you start picking it apart and having the conversations? Because discourse doesn't change the truth.
Yeah. I wonder if, and again, not to veer too far off of the.
Oh, we can go wherever you want, Peter. Come on.
I've been wondering if the divisiveness in society has to do with social media, because what happens is, so how the algorithms are programmed to kind of show you more of whatever it is that you want to see. Mm-hmm. So you like an article, you don't like an article, you're the person that reacts to these types of articles. Well, they'll keep showing you more and more of that. So in other words, if you're the person sitting there thinking to yourself, cannabis is great, does no harm, it's completely safe, well, then that's what you think, and you'll just slowly be pushed into that echo chamber because that's all you're going to see.
Yeah.
Right. Compared to being, maybe back in the day, you had to read the entire newspaper, right? So there would be point, counterpoint. Now there's less of that point, counterpoint. You just kind of see what you want to see over and over again because the algorithm is designed to keep showing you that.
Yeah. And also when we started engaging in social media, 20 years ago now?
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah,
Something like that.
Facebook, it was 20. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's I just remember being like back in the day, and this was even pre-Facebook. Like this was, oh boy, everybody out there.
MySpace.
Well, he's even before MySpace. Like out here in the Bay, we had this we had Tribe, and it was like it was a lot of burners and stuff. It was like it was post Friendster, and there I'm really aging myself, but pre MySpace.
Okay.
And there were like all these discussion forums and things like that. And I remember this was back when you actually met people in real life that you met on social media. Like I have friends today that I wouldn't have unless I'd had social media living in the Bay Area from back in the day. But it was amazing to see like some of these people who would just troll these discussion groups and be so aggressive and just full of angst. And then you'd meet them in person and you'd be like, you who's so mild-mannered at this party, you're like so full of like vitriol like online. What the hell? And then
people warriors,
yeah. And then when when everybody was at home, and I think especially with the political landscape and the fear around COVID, I think that accelerated that for some people. Because I know even for myself, and I like to think that I'm a cheerful, friendly person. There are a few times where like I think I was overwhelmed with everything, and I remember once like. It was like some political conversation, and I just put down, I'd say you were a special kind of stupid, but there's far too many of you. And I was like, whoa, where the heck did that come from? You know, it's a really interesting phenomenon, the whole thing with social media and how we show up in real life versus how we are on social media, and that cult of personality that we cultivate. On social media is a very weird thing.
We were talking before about how I have, I call it a brand where I make a lot of like dad jokes.
I love the dad jokes.
And so, show up in person to these events, and I make the same jokes, and I've heard people say, "Oh, it's the same jokes."
You're on brand, even in real life.
I was like, nope, same joke. I write them.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, hey, and thinking about like social media and in real life, because for those of us who know you from social media, you do have quite a presence, and you talk about a lot of interesting topics, even outside of your area that you work professionally as a banker. But how did you get into cannabis? Like, what was it that got you into it for your career?
Oh, sure. That's a good question. Thank you. So banking, right? I've been in banking 23, 24 years or so. I've done different things, middle market, private banking. What I kind of started to see sort of years ago was that the people that I knew that were doing really well, really next level well, they tended to specialize in something. Mm-hmm. They were, in some cases, like really well known in a certain industry. They were the type of people that would be like, oh, I know, like you could name a company and they're like, oh, the CEO is so-and-so, like they knew everything, And so for a long time, I had been thinking, what could be my thing? What could be my niche, if you will? And so, so you can't time timing. I kind of lucked out in a little bit, which I think a lot of these stories go that way, right? There was a bank that wanted to, I had heard through the grapevine that they were exploring cannabis banking. And, you're talking about like 7 years ago. And I was kind of like, whoa, cannabis banking? Like, who's going to do that? And so I sort of thought to myself, well, why not me, right? Why couldn't I? Like, it felt like greenfields. It felt like, I don't necessarily know this is true or not, but I didn't know anybody that was in cannabis banking, right? So that's what happened. I really sought out, I wanted to have a specialty, some area where I can, make a name for myself, if you will. So that's kind of what happened.
It's a fascinating area. It's funny because for our listeners out there, when we first jumped on before we were recording, our viewers talking about it not being as interesting, but it is fascinating. Like, I think banking gets a bad rap for being like a dry area of conversation. But when you think about it, finance fuels so many things in our world, and in cannabis, it's been a major pain point.
Yeah.
And it,
Yeah. So I have a funny trigger for the cannabis thing. So what happened was, again, I had felt this for a while. Like, okay, people that I knew that did really well, they tend to specialize in something. And what kind of finally pushed me out of the nest, meaning like I literally, pulled the cord, if you will.
mhm.
Um, the bank that I worked for at the time, they brought in this crypto banking team. Now, this is like 8 years ago, right? And they were crypto banking experts. So 8 years ago, like who knew anything about crypto at all? And I
Right.
was like, these guys are experts at crypto banking. Like bullshit. I was like, you guys just made this up, or you guys spoke this into existence. No, don't get me wrong. They proved it like in the years since. Yeah, that was one of the biggest programs in the world. So
Yeah.
they really knew what they were doing. Um, but the point is, at the time, I was like, oh man, like these guys just saw an opportunity, right? And so
Right.
so that's kind of what that was the final draw, if you will, the final straw, if you will.
Well, and you think about it, it's like they may not have been at the time experts, but they probably knew more than your average person. And then how
Sure.
much have they learned since that point in time
Yeah.
about the area? And in going with that, like, what are some of the, because when you went into it, it was all new to all of us.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, compared to like then compared to now, what do you think as far as like your base of knowledge? How has that changed? And I mean, I keep bringing up the word nuanced. I mean, banking and cannabis. It's like there's a lot of, I mean, some people have had banking for years because of relationships that they've had with their banks. Other people have constantly, had problems. And I know for myself, like, I don't have a plant touching business, but Stripe won't process me.
Right, right. Oh yeah, I mean, I feel like it's evolved a lot, and yes, I certainly feel like I'd like to think that I've gathered a lot of knowledge over the years. Education helps, right? Like there's courses that I've been able to take, certifications. You see all the designations I've got.
Yeah. You've got an
So
alphabet behind your name on LinkedIn.
I'm trying to compensate for a short last name. You know how it is.
you know.
So yes, I think not just speaking something into existence, not just faking it till you making it,
Mhm.
because you do want to prove yourself, you do want to educate yourself. So and not just on the banking side, right? Like you and I are talking about products. I've put in the time to learn the product, learn the different names, what they do, what they don't do. Not well enough apparently, but
We all do that once in a
whatever.
while.
But yes, to your point, the idea that it can be a specialized vertical means that there's specialized knowledge. And I think it's interesting, like in the early days, the way cannabis banking works versus the way it works today. I do think it's changed a lot. Like in back in the day, even an ancillary business like yours, for example, right? To your point, like Stripe still won't do it. But like way back in the day, we would actually treat you like a cannabis business. We would ask you for like, all of your vendors. We we would go through every one of your transactions. And at some point, it was a little bit of like a why? Why are we doing that? Like,
Yeah. Well, and when you see like what do you see happening? Like we have a lot of conversations about things that are going on at the federal level and safe banking and all that. And for people who don't understand that, I, I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but what does that mean? Because we hear these words. We hear safe banking. We hear about how it'll change the industry.
yeah,
But for your average layperson, they're like, does that just mean I get to pay with my credit card or, but what
yeah,
are the nuts and bolts behind that for people?
sure, yeah. So to understand safe banking, you first have to understand something called BSA, Bank Secrecy Act. So believe it or not, I guess this is true for every person, but it's doubly true for someone that works in a bank. Um, so money laundering, right? So cannabis is federally illegal. Thus, proceeds from a cannabis business can be considered illicit funds. Putting those funds into the financial system is money laundering by definition, right? So BSA, the Bank Secrecy Act, actually puts an onus not only on the bank, not only on the institution, but on the person. So as an executive of a bank, if I am aiding and abetting in money laundering, in other words, you came to me, you told me the truth. Hey, I've got this cocaine business, how do I put the money in the bank? I figure out a way to help you do that. I'm aiding and abetting money laundering.
Okay.
Not only can the bank be fined, but I can be fined personally and thrown in jail. Again, money laundering is always true for everybody, but there is actually a specific reg that applies to bankers that actually adds additional penalties. So in light of that, why would any banker do it? Right?
Right.
Safe banking. So what does safe banking do? Safe banking is a set of safe harbor language. In other words, hey, we get it. There's a discrepancy between federal and state law. If we don't do this, you're going to have this problem where these institutions, these cannabis businesses cannot be banked. So safe banking was introduced to create the stopgap, right? If you, meaning a banker, a bank, et cetera, if you're banking a state legal cannabis business, we won't prosecute you. Like literally, that's safe banking. However, it's been 10 years since the first iteration of SAFE was introduced. Now it's called safer banking. So 10 years, we're on attempt number 9, right? It's gone through the committee, so 8 prior times. It just hasn't passed.
Right.
So what would the impact be? Well, it's sort of interesting. The status, the world that safe banking contemplates, or safer banking now contemplates, happened. So it just took too long, basically, right? So again, keeping in mind the context is that it was first introduced 10 years ago. And back then, sure, that was revolutionary, groundbreaking, right? We can't put money in the system because the law specifically, very specifically, prohibits from doing so. Great, you introduced a law that will allow me to do so. So people went ahead with the assumption that it was going to pass. It hasn't yet. But the world that safer banking would have created just simply happened because there was an assumption that it was going to happen. But more specifically, though, in 2014, FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, released a set of guidance, so cleverly named FinCEN 2014. And it essentially became safe banking.
Okay.
Right. So it makes sense, right? If you think about it in context, 10 years ago, they were like, wow, we better do something about this. Here's proposed legislation. When that came out, so around the same time, the bank regulators said, well, we better do something right now, right? Because otherwise, how will any of these businesses bank? So to answer your question, safer or safe, I'm waiting for safe it, by the way. That's when it's going to finally pass.
All right.
Safe banking is nothing more than protection language for a bank or credit union that is banking cannabis. The reason why it became slightly ineffective is because the world that would have happened had it passed actually just happened.
Yeah.
It just went ahead and happened. Now payments is a totally separate thing. Believe it or not, there's technically nothing preventing a credit card company or debit card company from doing cannabis today, because they could do it just the same way these banks and credit unions are banking cannabis by following FinCEN 2014 guidance, but they don't want to.
But they want the money. I mean, they have to.
Well, if you put into perspective though, let's say MasterCard, they process like hundreds of trillions of dollars a year, right? Like literally.
Yeah.
Like what do you think cannabis represents in terms of like transaction flow? Less than $1 billion, maybe, right?
So it's not big enough fish for them to really go
To
after
take
it.
on any amount of risk, even if it's paper risk, right? It's not worth it. It also does come with, and you see how cannabis banking works today. It's happening, but it's expensive and laborious. So what are all banks doing? Well, we're following FinCEN 2014 guidance. But to do so requires that there's a lot of hoop jumping. And of course, we're worried about the optics of it. A regulator comes in, an examiner comes in and says, okay, you've decided to bank cannabis. Show me why, show me what you're doing, show me everything. So in other words, you attract attention from someone you don't want attention from, or you don't want increased attention from.
Right. Yeah. No one likes an audit.
Does the credit card company, who again does trillions of dollars, hundreds of millions of transactions a year, do they really need to pause and think about something that at the moment is barely a rounding error for them? We know the answer because they've told us that the answer is no. So, you remember the Ease case? Where Ease was taking credit cards and stuff like that. And look, this is all public information, right? Like, CEO went to jail, got found guilty of money laundering. They were miscoding, right? And so that's the only thing we have on record where a MasterCard executive was put on the stand, and they were very clear, very transparent. We are not going to be in cannabis till it's federally legal. And mind you, I don't speak for MasterCard, obviously, but based on their public statements as such, I don't think SAFER would have made a difference for them, because that is a set of language that helps financial institutions, right? So it doesn't bridge the gap between the paper risk, which is federal illegality, and the fact that they're just saying, well, we just won't do anything to you. In other words, they're putting on paper non-enforcement. They're not making it legal.
Do you think, so what you're saying is that until we see federal legalization, we're probably not going to see much movement as far as credit cards go?
I don't think so. But again, I'm purely basing this on what is publicly available, which is not much, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've been very consistent in saying, federal status. Now, Schedule 3, right, would make it that it's not necessarily federally legal. However, it brings up a weird point, right? So Schedule 3, of course, that means that it's like pharmaceuticals, let's say. So any adult use operator, well, they're still just as illegal, technically, right?
Yeah.
It would be the same degree of gray that currently exists. Now, a medical operator, I guess, perhaps, but the product that they are selling, which of course is what is being federally regulated under Schedule 3. Well, right now we don't have Schedule 3 regs. If you had to take your product and make it Schedule 3 compliant, you literally can't do it. There's no such regs exist. And let's be honest, it may be years before they exist.
Yeah, that's it. And people, it still is going to make things complicated for the recreational market.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Think of it this way. So 28 Farm Bill, right? Legalize hemp. CBD, right? The FDA literally just punted and said, well, we can't come up with regs. Let's do something about this. We're 6 years into it, right? So, to think that like, okay, it's going to be Schedule 3 and the world's going to change, probably not. I mean, look, there's some obvious things, right? 280E, maybe things like capital markets, et cetera, but some of the nuanced stuff like, so let me give you an example. I get these calls all the time. Someone wants to get bank debt for their cannabis business. Conceptually, we are willing. So there are banks and credit unions now willing to lend to cannabis. But what do banks want to see? Boiling down very simply, well, we want to see, income, right? Obviously, your ability to service the debt. We also like to see collateral. So the loan has gone bad. What do we do with the loan?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is a cannabis business's most valuable asset? Probably the license, right? You would argue. Inventory, right? Neither of which really has collateral value.
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then when you're looking at I know people who do banking, they say how incredibly expensive it is to do banking because not many banks offer it. There's not there's not a competitive market for servicing this industry. It's more about who will actually take you on. So you pay a premium for that
Right.
opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, this myth of cannabis banking is that it's not available.
Hmm.
Um, that was probably true. That was definitely true in the early days. Now, I think the industry is largely banked,
Yeah,
right? Or it can be banked if you want to be.
right.
In other words, the cannabis operator today that isn't banked might be doing that by choice,
Yeah.
right? Because to your point, there's a question of capability, capacity, and cost. So in other words, you went out there. If you've got a small business and you don't necessarily need much, right? Like you don't qualify for a bank loan anyway. You don't want a bank loan anyway. If you're just putting checks, cash in the bank, maybe you think to yourself, it's not worth it. I don't want to pay $1,000. I don't want to pay $500 a month.
Hmm.
Um, and so to me, I think that today, a cannabis operator that wants an account can get an account. It's possible it's not an account that they like. It's possible
Yeah.
that they just don't want to bother, right? Because of the cost, because of, it's not enough for them. Um, so part of the issue is that in the early days, these services started popping up everywhere. Companies, you know how it is when there's a need, people show up to fill it, right? Um, so these reg tech companies popped up to help banks. Okay, here are the FinCEN guidance, right? And I'm sorry, by the way, the FinCEN 2014 guidance is a literal copy and paste of the Cole memorandum. So
Oh.
if you're familiar with the Cole memo and the priorities that were listed within, it's exactly what's in the FinCEN 2014 guidance.
Well, and for our listeners who may not be familiar with it, will you briefly tell them what the Cole memo is?
Oh, sure, sure. So way back in the day, then Attorney General Cole put out a memo acknowledging this discrepancy between federal and state law, right? And essentially, and again, I'm way oversimplifying here. Essentially, the Cole memorandum said, hey, as long as the state legal programs are not violating these priorities, right, that I, as Attorney General, am listing here, and there's like 8 points, along with some red flags and stuff like that, um, hands off, right? So it was a formal acknowledgement of non-enforcement. Again, didn't make it legal. It was saying, hey, stalemate, don't do anything unless it violates federal jurisdiction,
Mm-hmm.
is what it really boils down to. So there's things in there about interstate commerce. There's things there about selling to minors, selling on federal land, cartels. um, so where am I going with this? Well, that makes sense from a prosecutorial standpoint, right? Like, okay, keep the money away from the cartels. So in other words, someone is using it as a front, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't sell to minors. Sure, we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Federal land, obviously, right? Which, by the way, is sort of interesting with respect to, so you remember the whole initiative of California wanting to create their own interstate, path.
Yeah.
Well, that would be in direct violation of the Cole memo, right?
Right, which is why they decided to forego it altogether at this time.
Yeah. Um, so the problem, of course, is that you take that language and you put it into banking regs. Okay, so how does a bank know if you are or not selling to minors?
Right.
How does the bank know whether you are or are not a front for a cartel? Which, by the way, we would always, of course, that would be a normal consideration for us. But now that it's specifically spelled out, we actually have to tell the regulators, well, this is what I'm going to do, for this priority. It's actually in the bank exams now. Like if you were to read through like field manuals, meaning a bank examiner is coming to a location and they're doing our exam, it's literally in their exam manual.
Wow.
So they'll go down the checklist, right? Like, Sarah, show me how make sure they're not on federal land. So this is the swing in early psychology, cannabis banking psychology to today. So in the early days, it was way over the top because we would ask you all these questions. So what do? We would ask you for your license application, meaning the application that you filled out to get a cannabis license from the state. Now, I can't speak to California, but like in New York, our earliest licensees, um, some of those applications were like 10,000 pages.
Yeah, yeah. It's daunting the amount of paperwork that goes into
Yeah.
these.
So that's part of the reason why it was so expensive in the early days. I mean, you remember the horror stories from like Colorado, early California, when it was like $10,000 a month, and it was just a checking account. Like it did nothing. It was literally just a place for you to put your money, write checks for your employees, right?
Hmm.
That was it, and they charged you $10,000 for the privilege of doing that. But to be fair, defending my brethren here, the problem was we were doing too much. We were doing so much, right? We were collecting thousands of pages of documents. We had to read it, right? Because we had to read it because once we write it into our policy, now the examiner's expectation is that we actually do that,
Hmm.
right? So you copy and pasted the FinCEN 2014 guidance into your policy. Well, then, Sarah, you better show me how you're checking to see that every sale is not going to a minor. Now, today, of course, we know, well, the state, when they issue the license, will do a site audit and ensure that it's not on federal land. I'm sorry, depending on the state. In New York, we do, for example. Um, so we don't need the entire application, and frankly, we don't know how to read it. It's meaningless to me, most of it, right? Like we used to make sure, for example, you know how like there's like a site design criteria, how many cameras you have. We used to do that. Banks used to do that. We used to show up in a place, take pictures of all the cameras and stuff like that.
That makes
Um,
sense.
we don't really do that anymore because we were like, is that really our job? Like, that's not really what we.
Yeah.
So to be fair, some of this is just passage of time, right? Meaning, after a while, after you get past the initial psychological stigma of like, oh, this is cannabis. And look, there's a stigma.
Hmm.
Um, I still get this question a lot, where banks. I'm sorry, for a period of time, I was also a consultant. I was helping banks and credit unions build their cannabis program. I used to get this question a lot. People would ask me, "Does the money smell?"
Back in the day, in the medicinal days, it might have because we had a lot of open cannabis. I know we all
Yeah,
smelled when we left work.
yeah, yeah. So like, cultivation, manufacturing, maybe some
Yeah.
money smells. But like, yeah, retail stores, no, it's all sealed.
But
um,
that just kind of reminds me of what was it I heard before about like, they did some testing on different bills and like how much cocaine you can find on
is that true?
currency.
But it's kind of funny when you think about it, right? I think it's the stigma, the stereotype of this, stoner, right? Pulling up in the mystery van and a waft of smoke follows him or her into the branch. Um, so that's what people don't want.
Right.
They didn't want the stoner coming into the branch with $20,000 of cash. The money smells. But again, I think you and I can agree. Well, that's not how it happens. Like these are these are
No.
professional firms, right?
Yeah.
Um, so then that's what that's just nothing more than a passage of time of saying like, oh, well, we see other banks doing it and they've done it successfully. They've gone through multiple bank exams. Nothing is happening to them. We can do it too. So there's definitely a little bit of herd mentality involved.
Hmm.
Um, and then of course, I mean, you said it yourself. It really comes down to competition, right? If there's one bank doing it in the entire country, yeah, that bank can charge whatever they want. And you have no choice but to accept it, right? Today, it's getting competitive. We actually see, believe it or not, I think that the pendulum is swinging. I actually am starting to see programs fail, um, but fail because they couldn't get business.
Mm. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
people are getting more discerning.
yeah, yeah,
When we look at it, I mean, it's not even just a how we do business issue, it's a public safety issue.
yeah,
Because when you have people who are going into dispensaries and, people who don't have the best of intentions know that these people going into dispensaries 9 times out of 10 are going to have a decent amount of cash on them to make a purchase. There are
yeah,
ATMs inside the dispensaries.
yeah,
And then they also know that there's going to be a lot of cash on hand in the dispensary itself from the sales. That's a a huge pain point for public safety and the safety of the businesses. I know, like, when I was a co-chair of the legalization task force for San Francisco, one of the conversations we were having was the fact that people had to go up to Sacramento to pay their taxes with
Oh
duffel
yeah,
bags full of cash.
right, right.
And
No, it's crazy. Back in the day, that's how it happened.
yeah, and it made you a mark for theft.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think again in the early days, that definitely happened, right? And now I think that the cash now is because that there's no payment option. Well, there's less payment options, right?
Right.
Look, the reality is, you see them, right? Some of the stores have cards. Um, they shouldn't,
Hmm.
but hey, they have cards. They
Yeah.
work. So the cash is definitely significantly less now than it was even a year ago, 2 years ago, let's say. Um, so yeah, the days of paying your taxes in cash, right? I think that's well behind us.
Yeah, for sure.
Even as recently, as far back as like when I first got in, I used to always hear these like urban legends. Someone says, "Oh, I've got a great client for you, but they've got $10 million, under their mattress or something like that."
In a barrel,
Uh,
buried in their
yeah,
backyard, but not stacked.
no, no. But even back then, I would say to myself, "Is that true though? Like, why would that be true? Like, because even for a business that's doing really well and you're churning the cash, but you're churning the cash, right? You don't how did you wind up with $10 million? Like it doesn't make sense to me. So I think that those are urban legends of like somebody with $100 million in literally in vault. I don't see it. I don't see how that's possible because you got to pay taxes, pay your employee very high taxes.
Yeah, I mean, the last time that that was even possible was when things were very underground,
Oh, sure.
and people were making 3,000 a pound because of the risk and the
Yeah, yeah,
and the lack of access.
yeah. No, believe it or not, now there's actually programs that are going out there with like free checking. Um, Now don't get me wrong, I think there's a little bit of hidden cost there. So, for example, I'm aware of a program where they say, oh, it's reduced fees provided you use our payment rail.
Mm,
So we know that what that means is that they're getting a split on the other side, right? Because there's a real cost to cannabis.
right, right. Well,
Yeah,
and it makes it difficult too. Like, you have to have a way to be able to pay your employees. And that was one
yeah,
thing I always felt very lucky. Like, I got in before legalization, but I worked for a company where we were always paid in checks.
yeah,
And, all of our taxes and everything were taken out. We had
right.
401ks and insurance, and people would be like, where you work in cannabis and you get that? And I took it for granted at the time until I started to hear the stories of other places where it's like, no, I get paid in cash. And how do that's a really difficult thing then when you're dealing with, you know, your own banking. And
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're applying for a loan or even a place to live, and even but it's such a weird thing that people who don't work in the industry don't understand that there are these there's normalization, and then there's still stigma and taboo. And I just
yeah.
remember, like, when I was talking to my old boss back in the day, and he was like, "Yeah, well, when I do my taxes, Sarah, 1/4 of your work is listed as trafficking." And I was like, "Wow, wow, the federal government has me like, you know, I, I, I'm in a trafficking. God, how do I tell my mother?"
There's a half-built RICO case on you somewhere.
Mm. Between that and my work in civil rights, it's like I've got a very confusing dossier.
Well, you bring up well, in my nerdy banker mind, a fascinating point. So when you start thinking about all these little things, a 401k, a mortgage, right, a person's
Mm,
mortgage. So everything in this country is heavily federally predicated. So,
yeah.
for example, 401k, literally a federal tax code, right? So can a cannabis business, right, a federally illegal enterprise, can it give its employees a 401k? on paper, you might say no. Just like how cannabis businesses can't get bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
You can't file for bankruptcy.
Right.
Well, a person also cannot file for bankruptcy. If your primary source of income is I'm a grower, licensed grower,
Uh-huh.
the person cannot file for bankruptcy.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because what a bankruptcy case is all about really is creating a plan around your income, your future projected income. So they can't attach themselves to an illegal stream of income. In their eyes, I'm sorry. Let me be clear on that. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying in
Oh,
federal
I
court.
totally understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really confusing space. I mean, even to go a little off of banking, but on something that's very much adjacent and something that you work with is, that is connected to banking is, insurance, right?
Yeah.
So when I was teaching at City College, they're like, you have to have professional liability insurance to teach here. Because I wasn't regular faculty. I was coming in as, outside instructor. So I ended up getting that, but it was more expensive than it would be for somebody else.
Yeah.
And at the end of the year, my carrier dropped me, even though
like you're just teaching.
Yeah, I'm just teaching. I don't cultivate cannabis. I don't make a product, nothing like that. I was teaching doctors and nurses.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was like, really? You just got this much money out of me and now you're dropping me? This is like a bad date, guys. A bad date.
Well, what's sort of interesting is it's really the same problem in banking, right? And again, you said it before, it's the competition. It's the fact that a very small number of carriers are willing to provide the insurance.
Yeah.
And so again, it's expensive, right? So yeah, now you're starting to see specialized programs, specialized brokers pop up. They want to do cannabis programs now. It's sort of weird when you just start thinking how it's really hard to divide the federal and the state, despite the fact we're trying to say it's a dual system. We started talking about this mortgages, right? It's and I'm not sure of the statistic. It's like 95% of mortgages in this country are packaged up and sold to Fannie Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if a person writes on their source of income, if I write that I'm a cultivator, right? Again, licensed cultivator, can my loan be packaged and sold to, Freddie Mac, which as of this moment is actually owned by the Treasury? Again, on paper, you might say no. Don't get me wrong, it happened.
Mm-hmm. Freddie Mac sounds like such a friendly guy, but
Freddie Mac, no, and
no,
Fannie
but
Mae.
like Sally, Freddie and Sally are not nice people. I have to have you back because we have more to discuss. But when you look at the future,
yeah,
what are you excited about? What are you hopeful for?
Oh, well, I'm very hopeful for. This might sound counterintuitive because I'm in the business, but I think more competition is going to happen. We're seeing it happen. More banks, more credit unions coming into space, and so as that pricing pressure increases, we're seeing an increase in capability, capacity, a decrease in cost. The reason why that excites me is that I feel like that's more opportunities. Well, frankly, for someone like me, but it just means that these programs are going to grow. It's going to become real businesses for a bank, right? Not just let's try it. Like no, like we hired a person just to do that, right? Which is my current job, right? So I definitely see a future where, to your point, right? At some point, MasterCard, Visa is going to say, let's get somebody to run our cannabis division, and that's going to be a great day for the industry.
It'll be exciting. I really I can't wait for that to change. I want to have you on another time so that we can geek out about interstate commerce, because I think when we start to get into federal legalization and interstate commerce, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot of lawsuits from the states, especially, the ones that maybe don't grow outdoors and
protectionism.
Yeah. I mean, I already see stuff on LinkedIn where people are like, yeah, my state's better than yours. And I'm like, Don't be
It might be
boring.
true. I'm in New York. That might be true. Let's be honest. What's everybody smoking?
I know. What's it going to be? Well, it's funny because when people would come into the dispensary, and they come from New York, I'd look at them and be like, "We've got more than sour diesel here, guys." And they start laughing. They're like, "How do you know what I smoke?" I'm like, "Because so many of you do." The sour D in New York. That's where it's at.
That's it. That's all we got.
Well, not anymore though. Now there's
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's so much more. And it's I when I was in New York for MJ Unpacked in the spring,
yeah,
I mean, the smell of
yeah.
weed in the air, it's like
It's
everybody's
crazy.
enjoying it, but I couldn't get over the smoke shops throughout New York, and it's going to be a really, I mean, every state is different with what their
Yeah,
pain points are, and I'm really interested to see what happens with New York, and really excited to see what comes out of New York too, because as you know, and some people might be like, "Oh, you coastal elites," but New York and California, especially with like LA and San Francisco, we do set the trends for
yeah.
everybody in between.
We're
And
the best.
we are the best. No, I'm gonna people like, no,
You don't have any audience in the middle, do you?
probably, and they're like, you two are wrong. But I mean, we do like we culturally influence the rest of the United States in many ways.
Yeah.
We're very different. Like I have my New York wardrobe and my California wardrobe.
I do like how since I've been in cannabis, I've learned way more about certain states that I like Oklahoma. I've never talked more about Oklahoma than my
Oklahoma's
entire life.
fascinating.
Missouri? Like, what?
I know. Well, I mean that's it. Like going to Oklahoma was an eye opener, but it also was like when you look at the different states, because I think that working in cannabis and going to different states really shows you how every state is almost a little country unto itself with its unique
Yeah,
cultures.
totally
So
different market. Yeah,
totally different markets. So those policies, because policies, I always say policies aren't based on fact, they're based on state culture and stigma.
yeah,
Because by and large, that's what we see. So that's how when we see the anomalies or the differences in policy from state to state, it's a
yeah,
really fascinating study. And tell me what you think of this, but I really felt that Oklahoma was a very interesting model in the libertarian approach to cannabis
yeah.
policy.
Right, right. Um, well, fascinating, except that, I think we all see that, let's be honest, that stuff is not staying in the States, right?
No,
Yeah,
well, and a lot of my colleagues from California, when things were going downhill here, they're like, let's go to Oklahoma because it's a free for all. I mean,
yeah.
I just remember seeing like one place, and I don't think they're doing this anymore, but they're like, yeah, come on in and get a THC slushy while you shop. And I was all like, wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. But you can't go federal until you solve some of these issues. So
Yeah.
like the seed to sale tracking, for example. I actually took a certification course because I was thinking, so I'm blockchain certified, because I was thinking that could be the way to solve seed to sale tracking.
Yeah.
Because, the way we currently do it is not that great. So,
Yeah, I know. It's the bane of many of my colleagues' existences. But it's an interesting thing. I'm really interested to see how this all develops. And
yeah,
and the things that we think that we want in a perfect world for this industry to thrive have their own sets of problems, because it's not just a ball of yarn that we're unraveling. It's like it's like a ball of rubber bands. It's
right,
like, oh,
right.
this one comes off, and then this one, oh wait, there's a knot in this one. This one's been here too long and it broke. And it's like, I think that it's a really
And some of
interesting.
it snaps you in the face.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're so used to thinking that everything must be standardized and that
Yeah,
everything falls into line. And I think cannabis is a great way to illustrate that that's not so.
yeah,
And it's not just relegated to cannabis. Like life
yeah,
isn't that way. Policy isn't that way. And it gives us, for those of us who are passionate about the work, it is a call to critical thought. And like we were talking about earlier, and you're mentioning the fact that we need to have, I'd say polite discourse, but how
Or just discourse.
just discourse is cool. Like, I don't know that we can ask our colleagues to always be polite about everything.
Yeah.
But, for people who want to follow you on social media and see what you're doing, how would they go about doing that?
Sure. Please check me out on, I guess I'm most active on LinkedIn. So I'm just Peter Sue on LinkedIn. And again, I work for Hanover Bank, so I welcome you to reach out. Yeah, as you can see, I'm very chatty, so I'm happy to chat.
I love chatting with you. Yeah, and really, listeners, check him out. If you're on LinkedIn, Peter puts up a lot of really interesting articles. We were talking before we started recording today, and he was like, "Did you see this one I put up?" I'm like, send it to me. I want to check it out, because it's wonderful to have colleagues that it's like you're very into what you do, but you see the big picture, and you're very engaged in all areas of cannabis, which I think that well-rounded professionals do their work with the most heart and with the most thoughtfulness. So I'm
Well,
really,
thank you for that.
oh yeah, I was just so excited to have you here today. And really, I would love for you to come back again. We have so much more to talk about.
Cool. Sarah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And everyone, remember, if you like listening, please give us a review, share it with a friend. Let us know what your favorite episodes are. And if you'd like to stay in touch over social media, we are Planted with Sara Pion on Facebook and Planted with Sara on Instagram and Twitter. You can also go to our website, www.plantedwithsara.com, or listen to us on our parent network, Radio Misfits Network, where there are other great podcasts, like one of my favorites, the Winemakers Podcast. So check it out. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, whether that's Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Tune in. We are there. So join us. And until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, it's a wild world out there. Be good to one another. Until next time, take care.